Elio, Pixar's newest release, just had the worst opening weekend in the studio's history, pulling in only 21 million domestically and 14 million globally. A disaster for a film with a $150 million budget. And this isn't an isolated failure. It's part of a much deeper trend. Audiences are rejecting originality and family animation. Let's dig into why this is happening and what it says about the state of Hollywood storytelling. The data is brutal. Last year, Inside Out 2 earned nearly $1.7 billion. But every other family title in the top 10, Despicable Me 4, Mona 2, and Sonic 3, all had one thing in common. They were based on existing IP. The harsh truth is that if your film isn't a sequel, a remake, or tied to a popular franchise, it's almost guaranteed to flop. Even promising high-quality originals like Ruby Gillman, Teenage Kraken, Migration, Wish, and Strange World all flamed out. So what gives? Why is the most important box office demographic ignoring movie magic? Let's look at Elio, Pixar's latest miss. The film is a jumbled mess that would be hard to follow even for a non-to-hard Trekkie. He meets aliens. He gets abducted. He travels across the galaxy. He fights an evil warlord who wants to kill him. He hangs out with a bunch of clones, and he goes home. All in 103 minutes. The plot feels haphazard and exhausting. Parents in the audience have no shot at keeping track, but more importantly, neither do kids. Kids love simple stories that they can latch onto. Think Toy Story or How to Train Your Dragon. But Elio's plot is so scattered that it never coalesces into anything memorable. Why does this happen? Why do studios produce these over-engineered messes instead of bold, clean stories? It starts with fear. Studios are terrified of losing hundreds of millions of dollars. So instead of letting a strong writer-director execute a simple idea, they jam in more characters, more worlds, more emotional arcs, or exposition in an attempt to fix the story through endless rewrites. By the time it reaches production, it's too late. Elio had 3 directors and multiple screenwriters by the end, classic case of too many cooks. By comparison, here's the logline for Finding Nemo: a father looking for his son. Boom. One sentence. Instant clarity. Instant stakes. Instant appeal. Studios should embrace simplicity, lean into focusing on what makes the story special, not doubling down on complexity as a crutch. Yet that's where we are today. Fear is killing creativity. Studios are terrified of risking $150 million on something original, so they overcorrect. They micromanage. They Frankenstein the script. They polish until nothing feels human. And then they wonder why it doesn't connect. As critic Jason Solomons put it, you can feel the mechanism creaking.
I may be a little craziness.
A rough edge here and there would do them the world of good. But studios won't allow it. They've given up on the art of making movies for kids. And it's not just Pixar. Every major studio is guilty. Disney's Wish was a lavish musical about a kid who travels to the North Pole to meet Santa and ask for her wish. Sounds simple enough, right? But the execution was leaden. The music was forgettable and the whole thing felt heavy-handed and overwrought. Why? Because Disney wouldn't let go of the reins. They meddled and micromanaged, and the final product suffered. Sony Pictures Animation is arguably the worst offender. Their films are infamous for cramming in too much plot, too many subplots, too many characters, too many worlds. It's exhausting. In 2022, they released Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which had better reviews than Elio, but it was still a box office disappointment. Why? Because even a decent story needs focus. Puss in Boots bounces all over the place. It introduces an original villain, a magical cat, a cursed sword, a mythical wish-granting star, and a convoluted quest that takes the characters through several fantastical lands. There's way too much lore to digest. Who can keep track? Not kids, that's for sure. But Sony and other studios will never learn because the data is misinterpreted. Executives see a successful sequel like Puss in Boots pulling in over $900 million worldwide and conclude that crappier sequels are just fine. In reality, the original Puss in Boots grossed $323 million back in 2011. The sequel did okay, but the lesson learned is all wrong. Executives think the problem is that the first film didn't gross enough, so the sequel needs to be bigger and crazier. But that ignores the fact that both films are convoluted messes. Damn, In 2011, audiences gave the original a pass because it was charming and funny and visually dazzling. In 2022, those elements were lacking, yet executives don't get the memo. They believe the box office success of Hotel Transylvania or Trolls justifies expanding the universe and doubling down on manic energy and frenetic editing and 3D gimmickry. But those films are shallow and vapid and creatively bankrupt, and audiences are finally catching on. This also explains the recent resurgence of remakes and live-action adaptations. Without a doubt, the easiest path to $1 billion is a nostalgic IP synergy cash grab. You might think nostalgia is driving this trend, but it's really risk aversion. Studios are leveraging name recognition and built-in fan bases. A Lion King remake has no creative merit, but it's bankable because, well, it's The Lion King. The irony is that if studios embraced originality and allowed their creative teams to find the next Toy Story or Frozen, they could tap into the same kind of passionate fan base without relying on brand recognition. But they're terrified. They believe that originality equals risk, and risk equals financial ruin. So instead, they churn out imitations and regurgitate tired tropes. And here's the biggest irony of all. Audiences are rejecting those imitations. Families are rejecting overblown, over-engineered plots. They're rejecting cynical remakes. They're rejecting soulless cash grabs. They're rejecting everything studios are offering because it's all the same. There's no heart, no soul, no imagination. What does this mean for the future of animation? Without a doubt, this is a golden age for storytellers. Streaming services are hungry for quality content, and they're giving creators unprecedented freedom. Netflix is my life as a teenage robot or a kung fu panda. The Dragon Knight. Both excellent examples of how to take an IP and expand it with creativity rather than cynicism. Studios need to follow suit. Trust your writers. Trust your directors. Let them take risks. Allow flawed characters and messy plots. Embrace the unexpected. Don't fix what isn't broken. Families want something original, something daring, something that captures their imaginations. When was the last time a studio film surprised you? How about the last time it made you laugh or cry or think? If you're struggling to remember, it's probably because they've stopped trying. But audiences aren't stupid. They sense it. They know when a film is phoned in. They know when it's made by committee. They know when the heart isn't in it. And they're voting with their wallets. Till that dynamic shifts, Pixar can keep blasting kids into space, or Disney can keep dredging up old fairy tales. But it's the box office numbers that'll crash back to Earth. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.